So I was reading an article a couple weeks ago that completely blew me away. It was in HBR, which I'm sure you're thinking to yourself, like, really? It was interesting? Stick with me for a second. What it showed was conclusively the Fortune 500 companies that, think through this for a second. The Fortune 500 companies, actually, no, I'm not going to tell you yet. I'm going to make you guys get involved in this presentation because we're the last one for the day. And you guys have been here for a little while, and I want to make sure you're paying attention. So let's do a poll. What do you guys think, A, B, C, or D, is the factor that would lead the top quartile of Fortune 500 companies? Stick with me for a second. I mean, CEO experience matters, right? Like, you got to know where the bodies are buried. B, like, founded the past 30 years, probably more likely to be a tech company, maybe understand digital a little more. Like, it could be useful. C, female board representation, different points of view. Or D, operating on a global scale. Like, all of these, totally relevant, right? Now, there were some good answers already. For those with no idea, just think back to your SATs. Or, for some folks here, how you got into Cornell. Always guess C if you have no idea. Female board representation literally has a 53% impact if you're in the top quartile of Fortune 500 companies in terms of representation versus the bottom on your return on equity. 53%, that's crazy. And what's even crazier is if you were to look at any other research-backed recommendation right now for how you improve return on equity by 53%, every entrepreneur in the room right now would be like furiously scribbling notes. Be like, I need to figure out how I go into my Monday meeting and like shout eureka to the team. Like, we have to do this. Fair? Come on. And yet that's not how we approach diversity at all. Instead, we tend to think of diversity, and there's a ton of discussion around it. We tend to think of diversity as more of a moral obligation. And something that, in fairness, companies should do even if it is in their detriment. And that turns out to be totally the wrong way to look at the problem. Diversity is, yes, it is a good thing for society. That's true. That's real. But that's not the reason diversity will win. The reason diversity will win is because it's not an obligation, it's an opportunity for companies to dramatically outperform. In fact, I don't know of a single other way than by having a diverse set of perspectives and opinions around the table that a company can consistently improve their performance, like anywhere near this level. And so why do we think of diversity as a challenge? Why do we think of it as an obligation, as opposed to something that we should look at as a chance to improve the way that we operate as entrepreneurs and people thinking about trying to solve problems? So why does this happen? Well, turns out most problems are relatively complex. If they weren't, someone else would have already solved it. And we as individuals, when trying to solve problems, see the world through the lens of our own experiences. And no matter how broad those experiences are, it's kind of impossible for me to see the world through the lens of, let's say, a 25-year-old young woman from Lagos, Nigeria. I can't do it. And so there are two ways that we can learn what we don't know. One is we can try and fail, and the other is we can bring in folks who do have different experiences and who have gone through different life journeys. And I gotta say, the second one's way more fun. So to highlight this, I want to share a couple stories with you. First, I need your help again. I need you to create a mental image of a friend of mine. This friend is a 25-year-old software engineer at a really hot venture-backed startup here in New York. Just raised their Series A, growing like crazy. Everyone imagining this engineer? Got it? I'm sure, this is Tolu, by the way. I'm sure this is exactly what you all were picturing, so kudos, thank you. I appreciate that. Let me tell you a bit about her. So Tolu is 25. Yes, she works for a very cool venture-backed startup here in New York. But she does that from Lagos, Nigeria. And Tolu, who's been there for about a year, had about a month between being hired and actually starting with this company. Tolu decided, after hearing that the company was interested in using React.js, or at least exploring it, which is a cool new JavaScript framework, that she was going to take that month and just teach herself React. Because why not? That'd be interesting. When she starts, she's already ahead of everyone else on the team and is able to then give the rest of the team a playbook on how they can incorporate React into their platform. How many folks here have hired engineers over the past couple years? Anyone? Has anyone seen anything like that before? Ever? That's not how people approach onboarding? Tolu didn't think that she was doing that to go above and beyond. She didn't think that I'm going to try to stand out in some way. She thought, why wouldn't I do this? She loves jumping into things. She enjoys the process of learning. She was just interested. And she wasn't bound by the approach to onboarding that most venture-backed startups in the US would take. And as a result of that, she was able to add more value and hit the ground running in a way that very few other engineers would. Let me tell you about another friend. Meet Faisal. Faisal is from Togo. He's an Andela fellow, and actually the first from Francophone West Africa. Faisal, again, Togo, Francophone country, grew up speaking French. And around his mid-teens, realized he just loved the idea of software development, but also solving problems with technology. Like being able to use software and data and technology to actually impact the world around him. But he ran into a problem, and that's the world of software development, and Stack Overflow, is largely in English. And so at some point, it becomes pretty challenging if you don't speak English to become a world-class developer. And so think back at least what my friends, I don't know about your friends in college, what my friends in college who may sometimes have chosen majors based on proximity to the dining hall would do is say, you know what? That's probably kind of hard. I'll do art history. That sounds way better. No offense, art history is wonderful. And Faisal decides to teach himself English in order to become a better software developer. He then hears about this program, Andela, that is just operating in Lagos, Nigeria, and also, by the way, that has a 0.7% acceptance rate. For context, Harvard's like 6%. And decides he is going to take a bus one way across Benin, a different country, 12 hours, to apply for this program, because he just has to be part of it. Unsurprisingly, one doesn't tell us this at all, but gets into the program, and 6 months later is also working with a very hot venture-backed startup in San Francisco, who he's now been with for about 2 months, and they've already said, hey, can we get 2 more iOS engineers like Faisal? He's awesome. And I bring up these stories because each of them reflects something that is pretty fundamental about how we see diversity and how we should see diversity. And you look at these, this is happening right now. These stories of Nigeria and Kenya exist right now around the world. But this is not a new phenomenon. You look back at history, the exact same premise has been true. Diverse teams with different backgrounds can solve the most challenging problems. I want you to meet another friend of mine. His name is Abe. So, Abe was one of 4 candidates in the election of 1860. And it was about as civil as our current election cycle, which, as you can imagine, then was even more shocking. And after winning in a contested convention, Abe decided to appoint all 3 of those other candidates to his cabinet. Famously created what's been described as the team of rivals. It's actually a pretty good book about it if you ever get the chance. And went on, 1, to pass the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, 2, to bring the country out of civil war and keep the Union together, and 3, to generally be considered one of, if not the most successful presidents we've ever had. He had some real challenges to deal with. And when asked, why are you bringing your enemies into your cabinet, one of whom actually continued campaigning against him even after he won, he said, these are the best men in the country. In fairness, he probably should have had a couple women. But he said, these are the best men in the country. And why would I deprive the country of this kind of strategic thinking? By coming together, we will actually be able to make it through the problems that we have. And so what this brings us back to is our friend Tolu, and the fact that I've been blessed over the past 2 years to serve as CEO of Andela and work with hundreds of software developers from Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, Togo, Uganda. Countries that most people, when they think software developer, wouldn't imagine. And what that's given me a chance to see is just how much those different perspectives have actually come together to add value and to create better outcomes and better solutions for the companies these developers have worked with. And it's also reinforced just how challenged our approach to diversity really is. Yes, there's a lot of discussion about it. There's probably an appropriate amount of discussion. But most of it misses the point. Diversity is going to win. Just is. But it's not going to win because it's a moral obligation. Diversity is going to win because it turns out different groups of people coming together who view the world with different lenses and have had different sets of experiences will be more creative about the way that they try to solve problems. And through that creative problem solving, you've probably heard the term multidisciplinary before and how important it is. This is all they're saying. Through that creative approach to problem solving, the companies that understand this and actually embrace it are the ones that ultimately will be able to achieve outsized success. But also, if you're looking for it, outsized returns as well. So for the entrepreneurs in the room, maybe this is something you should think about going back on Monday morning and bringing to the team. Thank you all.